When we moved into our new home, my in-laws gifted us a portrait. A family heirloom, they claimed. But the more I looked at it, the more I realized something was wrong. The secret they'd hidden in plain sight left everyone reeling. My wife and I bought our first house together 2 years ago just outside Charleston, South Carolina. It's not some haunted-looking place, just a quiet 2-story home with a small yard, white siding, and a porch swing I was proud of putting up myself. We moved in around spring. It was a big deal for us. I'd been working double shifts for almost 2 years, and she picked up extra hours too. We saved every penny for that house. Her parents, let's just say they weren't thrilled. They always acted like I wasn't good enough for her. Never said it out loud, but you could feel it in the way her mom side-eyed my truck or her dad never looked me in the eye when we talked. The weekend we moved in, they came over with a housewarming gift. A big one. Her dad carried it in himself. A tall, wide, heavy painting covered in a dusty sheet. They said it was a family heirloom. Her mom went on about how it had been in the family for generations, and that it should stay with the new head of the house. I thought that was weird, but whatever. We uncovered it and saw this creepy-looking portrait of a man in old-style clothes, the kind of painting that belongs in a museum or one of those fancy homes with spiral staircases. The man had sharp eyes, a stern mouth, and this cold expression that made your skin itch. Her mom said his name was Elias Whitmore, an ancestor from her dad's side. I didn't want to be rude, so I hung it in the hallway, across from the stairs. Every time I went down at night, it felt like his eyes were right on me. I figured I was imagining things. Weeks passed, and I couldn't shake it. I didn't like walking past it. It wasn't just creepy. Something about it felt off. The lighting in the portrait didn't match the way the man's face was angled. The shadows were strange. His clothes didn't look as old as they were supposed to. But the main thing? His face. There was something familiar about it. One night I was home alone. My wife was on an overnight shift at the hospital. I was halfway up the stairs when I stopped and stared at that damn painting. I don't know what came over me, but I grabbed it off the wall and took it down to the basement. I sat there under the single hanging light and just stared at the painting. Turned it over. The back was sealed up tight with an old paper label stuck to the frame, the kind you'd expect on museum pieces. It read Elias Whitmore, 1883. I Googled the name. I found nothing. No old records. No ancestry hits. Nothing in local archives. That's when I started digging. Over the next few weeks, I took photos of the painting and started sending them to online art forums and Reddit threads. One guy got back to me and said it looked almost identical to a painting in a historical collection in North Carolina, except the background was totally different. The original painting had an ocean behind the man. Ours had a field with a house in the distance. The guy even sent me the picture of the original. He was right. Same man, different setting. I went back and checked the painting frame again. There was something not right about it. I pulled at the backing until I managed to peel it off. Behind the canvas, tucked between the wood and backing board, was a folded, yellowed paper. It was brittle but still readable. It was a letter. It was dated 1972, signed by someone named Benjamin Whitmore. In it, Benjamin talked about covering up the truth and mentioned a necessary lie to protect the family name. He said the portrait was created to honor someone who didn't deserve it, that Elias was a stain on the family and that the original had been altered, literally painted over to hide the truth. Now I was angry. I took the painting to an appraiser in downtown Charleston. Guy had a small shop filled with dusty frames and old furniture. He spent about 20 minutes looking at it before confirming what I feared. It wasn't 1800s work. He said it was painted around the 1970s. Not a replica, a deliberate fake, styled to look older. I brought all of this to my wife. She thought I was overreacting at first. Said maybe her parents didn't know. But I pushed her to ask them. She called her mom that night while I sat nearby. As soon as she brought up the portrait, her mom went silent. Then said she didn't want to talk about it and hung up. That was it. The weirdness turned into full-on suspicion. I went back into research mode and started looking up public records tied to her family. Marriage certificates, obituaries, anything I could get my hands on. I eventually found something, an article from 1974 about a man named Elias Whitmore Jr., arrested in connection with multiple disappearances in the Charleston area. He wasn't convicted, but he was considered the prime suspect in at least 4 missing persons cases, including 2 children. My blood ran cold. The photo in the article showed a man who looked just like the guy in the portrait. Same face, same dead eyes. I printed it out, put it next to the painting, and showed it to my wife. She turned white, said she had never heard of this man. She called her dad this time. He denied everything, said I was digging up trash, that Elias was a misunderstood relative, claimed it was all rumors. That's when I knew it was a cover-up. They knew. I asked them straight up why they gave us the painting. Why now? Her mom just said, "It was time. That's all. It was time." Something cracked in me after that. I started thinking about the wording in that letter. Covering up the truth. Protecting the family name. They gave me that portrait knowing full well who that man was. Not some proud ancestor. Predator. A monster they wanted to keep hidden. I couldn't sleep after that. Couldn't walk past that thing without wanting to burn it. But then something hit me. Maybe they gave me that painting as some weird test. Or maybe they wanted someone else to carry the burden. Whatever it was, I wasn't going to stay quiet. I didn't tell my wife what I planned to do next. I wasn't even sure what I was going to do, to be honest. But I knew I couldn't let it go. I started looking deeper into those old case files. Took time off work. I told my boss it was family stuff. And that was true, I guess. I went down to the Charleston County Library archives. Got access to the microfilm records. The name Elias Whitmore Jr. popped up a lot more than I expected. Not just in the papers, but in police logs, reports that were closed with no arrests, strange accidents, even arsons. The more I read, the more it felt like everyone just stopped talking about him after 1975. Like someone flipped a switch and scrubbed him from local history. But here's the twist that knocked the wind out of me. One article mentioned a family photo taken during the 4th of July parade in 1971. I got a copy. I stared at it for an hour before I realized who else was in that photo. A teenage version of my wife's dad, standing 2 steps behind Elias, smiling. I compared that to the wedding album my wife's parents had let us borrow when we were planning our own wedding. There was a man in one of the group shots off to the side, cropped halfway out. No one had ever told me who he was. I thought he was just a random uncle. Same man, Elias. He had been at their wedding. I printed both photos, circled the faces, and left them on the kitchen counter. My wife saw them when she got home from work. She picked them up slowly, looked at them for a long time and said nothing. Then she sat down at the table and asked me, "What do you think they're hiding?" It was the first time she really let herself believe something wasn't right. That her parents had lied, not just to me, but to her too. And that's when she told me something I'll never forget. She remembered her dad once telling her, sometimes people make monsters and sometimes families keep them as pets. She'd thought it was a weird comment at the time. Now it felt like a confession. That night, I got a call from an unknown number. I picked up, expecting a telemarketer. It was her dad. He sounded calm. Too calm. He said, "You don't know what you're playing with. Some things are better left buried." I didn't respond. Just hung up. The next day, when I went down to the basement to grab the portrait, it was gone. I searched the whole house. Asked my wife. She hadn't touched it. We had no house guests. No one had a key but us. Someone had broken in, but only to take the painting. That same night, the motion light in our backyard went off at 3:12 a.m. I checked the camera. A tall man in a dark coat walked through our yard and stared directly at the camera before the feed went static. Police found no signs of forced entry. Nothing stolen. Just the painting. And that footage? Gone from the cloud the next morning. Wiped clean. My wife finally broke down. Said her dad had always been off. Controlling. Cold. But she never connected it to anything like this. She admitted something else, too. When she was young, maybe 6 or 7, she remembered waking up one night and seeing a man in the hallway just standing and watching her. She always assumed it was her imagination. Now she wasn't sure. We moved the next week, put the house up for sale and left half our stuff behind. But it didn't stop there. The day after we moved into the apartment, a letter came in the mail. No return address. Just a folded piece of paper inside. One sentence, "You should have let sleeping dogs lie." I showed it to the cops. They said there was no threat in it. Nothing they could do. But 2 days later, someone followed me home from work. I drove past my building 3 times, circled until I lost them. Black SUV. No plates. I only saw a shadow of the driver, big guy wearing a hat, face hidden. I told my wife we were being watched. She didn't even argue. That's when I realized something even darker might be at play. Maybe Elias hadn't worked alone. Maybe it wasn't just a cover-up of who he was, but what he did and who helped him do it. I dug into that too. Started checking property records. A name kept popping up on land deeds, trust documents, old bank papers. Whitmore Holdings, LLC. Guess who owned the house we just bought before us? Her dad. Through that LLC. It wasn't a gift. It was a setup. And that's when I knew the portrait wasn't just a lie. It was a message. And now I had no idea who else was involved. But I was going to find out. I didn't sleep the night I figured out her dad owned the house before us. I kept replaying everything. The gift of the house. The portrait. The warning. The break-in. The SUV. The letter. And now the fact that the property had never been random. He put us there. Put the painting there. On purpose. But why? My wife started to spiral. She was angry at me for digging, but angrier at her parents. She didn't want to believe it, but the proof kept piling up. And then she remembered something else. Something she'd never told me. Back when she was a teenager, she snuck into her dad's study to use his computer. He was old school and never let anyone in. She remembered seeing a locked folder on the desktop named archive_AW. She tried to open it. Password protected. She got scared and never tried again. But now it felt like that folder might hold everything. So I asked her if she knew the password he might have used. She shrugged and said he always used birthdays. Or death days. I asked whose. She looked up at me and said his brother died when he was a kid. Drowned in a lake. I paused. Do you know which lake? She shook her head. I googled drownings in South Carolina from the 1970s. It took hours, but I found it. A small news clipping about a Robert Whitmore, age 11, presumed drowned in Lake Marion. Body never recovered. Presumed. Not confirmed. Something didn't feel right. Why wasn't the body found? Then I found another file, an old sheriff's report that mentioned local speculation that the boy was kidnapped, not drowned. But the case was closed because the only suspect died in a fire days later. Guess who was mentioned as a close family friend of the missing kid? Elias Whitmore Jr. It was all circling back. And now the twist that hit hardest. I dug into property records for the land around Lake Marion. One plot near the water had been sold 3 times to shell companies, but they all traced back to Whitmore Holdings LLC. The name of the original buyer? Robert Whitmore. He never died. He changed his identity. Her dad was Robert Whitmore. That's why no death certificate existed. That's why everything about Elias had been buried, because Robert had been there. Because he knew. Maybe he helped. Maybe he watched. Maybe he joined in. And then I realized something that nearly made me sick. If Robert faked his death and grew up in hiding and inherited the name of a missing boy, then who the hell was Elias really? I went back to the photo from the wedding album, took it to a facial recognition app. I uploaded the wedding photo and the newspaper photo of Elias from the 1970s. They didn't match. Different people. Same name. The man in the portrait wasn't Elias at all. He was the real Robert Whitmore. And the man we thought was Robert, my wife's father, was Elias. He took his brother's identity. He took his name, his life, maybe even his property. The one labeled a monster in the letter? It wasn't about Elias. It was about Robert, the portrait subject. That letter was Elias trying to cover his tracks. Blaming everything on his brother, then assuming his identity after the supposed drowning. The man who gave us the portrait had killed his own brother. And now I had proof. But I also had a massive problem. If I exposed this, if I went public, what would happen to my wife? Her entire life had been a lie. Her last name was a lie. Her identity, her childhood, all of it rooted in a cover-up tied to a murder, maybe more. And worse, someone still wanted it buried. Because right then, as I stood holding both photos, trying to decide what to do, there was a knock at the door. Not a hard knock. Not aggressive. Just a quiet, slow knock, 3 soft taps. And when I opened it, no one was there. But on the doormat was a framed photo. Same size as the portrait. It was a copy of our wedding photo. Only this time, someone had drawn a red X across my face. After the photo with the red X showed up, I knew it was war. I didn't call the police this time. I knew they wouldn't do anything. There was no evidence. No fingerprints. Just silence. But I couldn't sit around waiting for the next message, the next scare tactic. So I did something I probably shouldn't have. I broke into my father-in-law's house. It was empty. I made sure he and my mother-in-law were out of town. They were visiting her cousin in Georgia. I had 2 hours, maybe 3, before someone would check in. I went straight to his office. Same desk my wife had seen as a kid. Same old computer. I brought a USB stick and a small camera with me. I booted it up, typed in the birth date from the drowning article, the one about Robert. Password worked. The folder opened. What I found still keeps me up at night. Dozens of documents. Newspaper scans. Photos. Names of families. School records. People who had vanished in the 70s and 80s. Every file was labeled with dates and notes, some in code, others written plainly. One folder was labeled Control. Inside were notes about shaping memory, rebuilding identity, eliminating risk. I scrolled until I saw a folder with my name. That's when I realized something I hadn't expected, something that knocked the air out of my chest. He'd been watching me for years. There were screenshots of my social media, copies of job applications, even notes from interviews I did 10 years ago. He knew where I lived before I met his daughter. He knew who I dated before her. Notes about my family's money problems, my dad's health issues. It was all there. I wasn't chosen by accident. He picked me. I was someone easy to control. Someone with no family nearby. Someone who'd be grateful for a house, a gift, a chance to feel like I belonged. The portrait wasn't just a symbol of family. It was a test. Could I keep the secret? Would I bury it like they did? I downloaded everything. I left the house exactly as I found it. But by the time I got home, my wife was gone. No note. No call. Her phone? Dead. I checked security footage. Someone had disabled it 5 minutes before the last alert. It had to be him. I called the cops. This time I had evidence. Real stuff. I sent the files to a journalist friend I knew from college who worked in Atlanta. He called back in a panic. Man, he said, do you realize what you just gave me? These people, they paid off cops, judges, therapists, social workers. There are names in here that are still in power. He told me to lay low. I couldn't. Not while my wife was missing. 3 days passed. No word. Then a package arrived. No return address. Inside was a burner phone. It lit up with one message, meet me where it began. Lake Marion. I knew it was him. I drove out there. Didn't tell anyone. Didn't bring a weapon. Just the phone and the USB drive. I found him standing on the dock. My wife was beside him. She looked pale, confused. Like she'd been crying for days. He turned around. Calm. Cold. You should have stopped, he said. You could have had a quiet life. I asked him what he did to her. He said, nothing. Yet. And that's when I made my choice. I took out the USB and tossed it into the lake. He looked shocked. For the first time ever. I said, it's backed up in 3 places. Try me. He stared at me, then turned to my wife. See? He's just like me. That rage. That instinct. It's in all of us. She didn't say anything. Then, slowly, she stepped back from him and pushed him. He stumbled, lost balance, fell into the lake. He didn't come back up. We waited. Nothing. And my wife whispered. He always said he couldn't swim. She never looked away from the water. Neither did I. The files went public a week later. My journalist friend published everything. The story hit national news. People were arrested. Judges stepped down. Families filed lawsuits. It tore open a part of Charleston no one wanted to face. As for us, we moved, changed our names. She took therapy seriously. So did I. But here's the part I'll never forget. I had a chance to stop early on. I saw the signs. I kept digging even when she begged me to leave it alone. I thought I was doing the right thing. But I dragged her into hell. We survived. But we're not the same. Sometimes justice comes at a cost. Sometimes revenge burns everyone in the room, even the one holding the match.